University here in Rome. We are physically here in Rome and very proud to be hosting this first post-pandemic edition of the Video Vortex network. My name is Donatella Della Ratta. I am an associate professor of communication and media studies here at John Cabot University, and on behalf of the communication department at John Cabot University, I want to welcome you today. For those of you who are here physically in Rome and those of you who are joining from the Zoomiverse. So I had the pleasure to join the last on-site edition of Video Vortex, which was in Malta before the pandemic hit Europe and the planet. And it was really, truly an amazing event. We are hoping today to recreate that festive atmosphere which I witnessed in person when I was in Malta. So we decided to structure this event as a kind of jam session between Rome, so the physical event happening here at the Guarini Courtyard in Rome, and the Zoomiverse, where we will have two very special hosts, Andrea Streske and Gert Loving, who are the founders of the Video Vortex network. Besides a lot of very interesting artists, activists, and scholars who are going to talk about the evolution of the video, online video today. But I want to give the floor to a very special host that we have today. I'm not going to host this event, but we have a very special one. They are the only person who can avoid wearing a mask. They can ignore social distancing rules, no hand sanitizers, no gels, no face shields, but simply they can speak, walk freely, and do whatever they want. So please, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, welcome Komi, our robot.
Hello.
Coming?
Hello. So I have a little bit of delay. You know, I'm a robot. I'm a little slow. But anyway, I will host part of this event while temporarily hosting inside myself somebody who apparently goes by the name of Albert Figurt. So as you can imagine, it's not easy to be a telepresent robot, especially under the sun. And this both for the human being that is controlling me right now and in my own humble machining perspective. Anyway, we will try our best. Somebody once said that in the jungle of academia and universities, you would usually encounter spineless bodies employed just as locomotion mechanisms carry around heavy heads, loaded with too much information and dandruff. Well, think of me, or us, as an even slimmer iteration of that hilarious average figure, but without dandruff, okay? So I will now introduce our first guest. It should be somewhere around me. Let me see. Oh yes, here it is. Hello. Hi. So our first guest is Gabriele Marino, and we are gonna have a walk towards that bench over there. Okay, Gabriele, so follow me, or better, I don't know, I'm trying to follow you. Let's see what's going on.
It's the same.
We're gonna walk little by little. I'm gonna wheel. And so, who is this guy? Gabriele is a semiotician, a drummer, and a cardboard musician. You'll see how in a moment. He investigates musical genres, pornographic images, imaginary records, and more recently, memes and virality. So for this first segment, he's gonna talk, or better, we are gonna talk about something very peculiar. So we're gonna engage in sort of comedial performance, and we're gonna start from here. So please take a seat. I'm gonna accommodate myself as well. Let me see. Oh, right. Yeah. And okay. So please come. Let's open the dance.
Okay, Comi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think
you want to be closer?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, the idea
Um,
is no. You have to be not so close actually. Okay.
Not so close. Don't stand so close to me, as the song said.
And
All right, and I'll stay like this. Yes.
we have just small technical problems here. No. With the mic that never occurred before. Okay. Maybe it's better if you come inside in the. Sorry guys, it's the wonderful experience of the. Okay. It's
What's going on here?
So Kami, we can start over, but you have to maybe you can stay here or you can you can crash into me. Okay. So the idea is to talk a little bit about a buzzword, a pandemic buzzword of ours that is a bit obsessing us as scholars and not only as scholars, which is Zoom bombing. And the idea is that we can build a kind of archaeo-semiotics of Zoom bombing, which is, from the one hand, aiming at broadening, widening the perspective, and on the other hand, to narrow the perspective. I would like to thank Albert. I would like to thank Donatella for for having me here. And actually, I'm here thanks to not a Zoom bombing, but a WebEx bombing. Being WebEx, the platform, the video platform that we use just like Zoom at the University of Turin. I don't know if Albert actually remembered the episode, but while I was taking a class of mine about musical semiotics at the University of Turin, and I was chatting with the students, and they were just a few, so I can remember their names and their faces. And it was one of the last lessons of the course. Actually, a strange, peculiar, funny, and clearly fake name popped up, and I was triggered because the very day before I witnessed a case of Zoom bombing in another university for another event, and I was upset. It was actually super cringe and super hairy. So I was triggered, and I asked the student to identify himself, to reveal his real name, and it was Alberto all along, actually. So.
Yeah, I can imagine it was a little bit uncanny. You know, I'm still very passionate about the wild and playful anonymity of the early web. So I like to indulge in my little nicknaming and alternative ego session. Excuse me for that. And the same is probably happening right now.
But so, Comi, you confirm that you are Alberto, and Alberto confirms that he was Zoom bombing my class, actually.
Possibly.
Okay. So let's start from the definitions, as we used to do in doing research and in the academia and so on and so forth. So Wikipedia says that Zoom bombing is a trolling practice. I think that we can agree with that partially. I think we can partially disagree. Everything depends on our definition of trolling. So whether and to which extent we do consider something like doing Zoom bombing as a joking practice, as a practice aimed at make people laugh and so on and so forth. Maybe we just widen so much, we just enlarge so much our Overton window so that we categorize something that is damaging and potentially harmful as something just laughable, something like that. Maybe we never actually stepped outside the internet of the origins, and we never stepped into the social media. We never got out of the magic circle of the original internet, the one featured with anonymity and avatars and fates and so on and so forth. And maybe we are not actually living the own life that Floridi is trying to explain to us since a few years. But as a matter of fact, I think that you can see, as a matter of fact, CMC, computer-mediated communication, has this structural feature, this characteristic, which is making for us completely impossible to detect if whom we are speaking to, the other guy on the other side of the screen, is actually serious or he wants to be ironic, and to whom this ironic action is going to be directed to. So this is a very basic function and meaning of the CMC. And according to this, I would say that trolling is not only deceptive, but also self-deceptive, a kind of self-masking. And I would say that it can be considered as a kind of communicational terrorism to a certain extent. So since we are moved by scholarly and research purposes, but we want to give also information, not only interpretations, here you can find a pie chart talking about which are the most common and the most employed semantic targets of Zoom bombing. So misogyny and toxic masculinity, black racism, homophobia, Asian racism, and anti-Semitism. So there are a few articles, essays, and a couple of books about this issue, this problem, Zoom bombing, taking precisely this perspective, so post-colonial studies, gender studies, etc. Another really interesting feature of Zoom bombing is that we can detect a kind of mole effect, a kind of insider trading or false flag effect, because we know statistically that most of the people involved in creating, in doing Zoom bombing are insiders of the Zoom meetings they call action for. So Zoom bombings are called on public websites like 4chan and Reddit. There are people responding to that, and the people who launch this call actually participate in the meeting in the first place. So words are important, words matter. We use Zoom bombing to describe a lot of other phenomena that are related to live video conferencing sabotage or hijacking. And we use Zoom because it's the video platform par excellence. And this is semantically interesting because it underlines how we put the spot on the context, on the ecology, the environment in which the Zoom bombing happens, and not on the specific weapon that people use to perpetrate the action itself. We have to take into account the damages and the types and degrees of damages and the irreversibility of these actions that are perpetrated thanks to these platforms. And also, we have to take into account the unpredictability of these events. We know that today a proper Zoom meeting is not a real proper Zoom meeting unless a Zoom bombing occurs. So we know that people, for example, in the US, really welcome YouTubers like Liu KFK or 2Med while they perform their Zoom bombings. And this raises the question of whether we should consider this bombing as something that is metaphorical or literal. But we have a huge kind of array, we have a huge menu of acts of something bombing. For example, we have what I would define 1% bombing, which reveals to be political press conference bombing, and here you can see a very famous, iconic, and memetic, I would say, incident, the 2015 ex-Femen Wit versus Draghi confetti attack. This is quite famous. Obviously, we have to remember our history, so we know that this ex-bombing is not something new. We have avant-garde bombing, we have avant-garde concert bombing, for example, Dadaists and Futurists kicking the shit out of each other during their respective concerts. And we have to take into account performance in general. So we have to remember that we can break the fourth wall. So we have a enunciational bombing, semiotician would say. We are in Rome, we want to pay homage to a local celebrity, and we have news bombing. News bombing is something that achieved the Guinness World Record thanks to this guy from Rome called Gabriele Paolini, who used to systematically hijack and sabotage politicians being interviewed by journalists and starting to yell strange stuff, staying behind them. So we are here to try to understand a little bit this topic, this subject matter. And we know that producing, making theory oftentimes has to be a disruptive practice. And this disruptive practice may take the form of a embodied practical action, like, for example, pouring a milkshake on the table onto onto which Jacques Lacan was doing a lecture. This was done by Anatole Atlas in the late 60s as a form of protest, obviously. And then another interesting theory bombing, I would define them in this way, is the one by Alan Sokal. Alan Sokal was a physicist who was completely against French theory, and he succeeded in publishing a gibberish article about French theory on a French theory journal. Another interesting example of X-bombing is obviously video bombing, and here you can see the case of Steve Cardinal, who later became a comedian after these performances of his, hijacking and sabotaging the chat roulette platform. So people would go to his channel looking for naked people, and they found naked people, a naked guy, but doing the parody, the satire of Miley Cyrus' Wrecking Ball video clip. We have also classic cases of bombing, like text bombing and photo bombing. So someone actually should appear and do a photo bombing in order to perform it and not only to talk about it. And obviously, as you could have guessed, the situationists like Guy Debord were the ones who made this interruption strategy their main and most prominent philosophy. We can think, for example,
if I can add something, Gab,
yes.
I was thinking about, from a machine point of view, once again, that you can also self-sabotage yourself. So think about somebody badly handling his or her own virtual room parameters. So something like a goofy approach that becomes a shit show. Or you can have the usual theoretical sabotage, so somebody throwing calembour, factoids, aggressive counterpoints around, trying to weaponize the discussion. And finally, since I'm talking to you through a screen, I wanted to add the technical sabotage, so purely distorting or altering images or audio outputs as a simple but disruptive signal disturbance. See, for example, what happens in a lot of so-called contemporary best of movies, which I'm investigating. I mean, me or other favorites, who knows? Films where all the action unravels on a user screen. So the genre is almost always thriller or horror, and you have a private online session with some friends having fun, and then suddenly this digital intimacy is disrupted by some ghostly presence, totally unexpected, not clearly acknowledged, not conventionally configured, partially invisible, and very, very brutal, cruel, menacing, precisely because it's not expected. So the new villain or serial killer is actually a Zoom bomber.
I agree with that. The idea is that we can find this very same phenomenon as displayed in very different media and very different languages and codes. It's something that it's strongly structuring entire aesthetics. For example, we know that for some scholars, in this perspective, works of art itself, themselves, are featured by stylistic discontinuity. We are using words like discontinuity and interruption as synonyms, but now we are going to see that they are different things, actually. A lot of people claim, and I agree with that, that Western philosophy actually stems from interruption, because Plato's Republic is one big interruption with Socrates that wants to come back home, and they didn't let him to go home, and so they forced him to continue discussing philosophy, etc. And the book, the dialogue itself, is filled with interruptions, and this is actually consistent with the perspective that, for example, Emmanuel Levinas, the philosophy of the face, as the device according to which we can open to the other. Levinas says that interruption is fundamental because ethics is grounded, is rooted in interruption, because it's just thanks to the vulnerability that we are subjected, thanks to interruption, that we can open and respond to the other. So the idea is that this form of experience that we are calling provisionally interruption is a kind of memento, is a kind of motto that we have to be aware of, and that says to us estote parati, so be ready, be prepared, because every discourse is public, and every public discourse means exposure, being exposed.
Yeah.
So
I think we have to somehow wrap it up, but we can do it through a scheme which is complicated but will remain in the memory of YouTube. So why don't we show it and try to, I don't know, summarize our final results?
yes,
Because we were investigating heavily this kind of topic up to this very night. And the more we go deeper, the more it's crazy and complicated. But we have a scheme.
okay, yes, actually I think it's better that we wrap it up, but okay, the idea is that we can try to systematize all these issues and all these words and all these semantic fields that we have used, by building a kind of map, a kind of semantic map, in which we can build up an opposition between continuity and discontinuity. So continuity is our filter bubble, is our zone of comfort, is where everything is flowing, is the dimension of the flux. On the contrary, discontinuity is the break, is the flow, is the fall, okay? It's the exception, the error, the mistake, and so on and so forth. And we know that the semantic map in general is something that does not deal only with opposite terms, but also contradictory terms. So we do not have only discontinuity, but also non-continuity, which means the border, the fact that we feel that there is a limit, that there is a fringe. And obviously there is also the non-discontinuity, which means that there is a patch, a fetch, a fill of some kind. So I would just say, now I don't have the time to delve into it in detail, but the idea is that we can articulate this semantic map and understand that we can distinguish between interruption and intrusion, between the glitch and the noise. So bottom line, the idea, sorry, I just want to squeeze it to the conclusion. So the idea is that we can, the idea is that we can kind of move from the domain of intrusion, which is the Zoom bombing, the domain of noise, communicational noise, and we try to sample that and remix into from intrusion to interruption, from noise to dialogue, communication, and maybe in order to accomplish such a goal, we can maybe be defined as affected by communicational cynicism, maybe not, maybe yes, I don't know. But the idea is that if we know that some counterpart is going to show up, maybe it's better that in the first place we take, each one of us, a bedside table version of the capital E shaman with us in order to be safe and avoid intrusion of that kind. Okay, I just rushed a little bit at the end, but I will give room to you again, Commi.
Yeah. Well, wonderful, Gab. It was a very stimulating contribution. Thanks for that. And by the way, the cardboard PowerPoint will remain fixed in the memory of YouTube, so you can always come back to that. And now I think we need to switch from Rome to the Zoomiverse. Yeah. Well, wonderful, Gab. It was a very stimulating contribution. Thanks for that. And by the way, the cardboard PowerPoint will remain fixed in the memory of YouTube, so you can always come back to that. And now I think we need to switch from Rome to the Zoomiverse. Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful, Gab. It's a very stimulating contribution. Thanks for that. And by the way, the cardboard PowerPoint will remain fixed in the memory of YouTube, so you can always come back to that. And now
Okay, we're in the Zoom room now.
Okay.
Alberto, I guess we're there. I will give immediately to Raad and Patrick. All right. I guess Raad, we are live on YouTube now.
Marvelous.
Yeah, Patrick.
Hello, everyone.
Alberto, I guess we're there. Okay.
Can you hear me? Patrick, hello. Maybe introduce yourself. I am Geert Lovink. We're here in Amsterdam with the Institute of Network Cultures. We're trying to coordinate the Video Vortex experiments, and this is definitely a very experimental session that's going on right now. So Patrick, where are you, and can you say something about your background?
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I'm Patrick Lichty. I'm a professor at Winona State University. I used to be at Zayed University in Abu Dhabi, and I'm also joined today with my partner, all things, Nagina Sabian, who's attending. So I wanted to say that. And yeah, I've been a video artist and theorist for almost 30 years now. And, you know, as an artist and activist, I've been part of groups like Second Front, the Yes Men, Art Mark, and, you know, independently. And yeah, I write about digital culture and reality, you know, mixed realities in the digital and you know, tacticality. So that's
yeah, and you are part of the Video Vortex community since a long time.
Yeah, since I think my first one was number 3.
Yeah, you're in fact now based in Minnesota since January, and ironically or not, you are teaching online video there, right? You're an instructor, so you're really back to the topic.
This is what I do now.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we are going to talk about the politics and aesthetics of live feeds, and we start with the theory of real-time and live events.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Do you have my?
Yes, it's working well.
Stack?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the thing that I've been talking about, and actually we're talking about this out on the Empyrean list as well this month. That we're in our last week at Cornell University. The notion of real space to real time and how this is affecting culture. So where I got interested in this is that 1998 in Wired magazine, Paul Virilio talked about technological culture moving from real space to real time. And he starts in this in Art of the Motor, basically how transportation technology, as early as you know, sailing ships, but you know, going into, he talks a great deal about you know, the trains and locomotives, you know, compressing space through you know, the ability to move faster than you know, one would on foot. And the thing is that now he's talking about in that article, looking at regimes of image production collapsing reality from real space into real time. And this is kind of a Mcluhanist sort of thing, in which the acceleration comes from the military and commercial sectors because of the fact that, you know, whoever has the information first, you know, has the advantage, you know, as what is, I think Laurie Anderson says in Mcluhan's wake, you know, you got to have the latest thing. And let's see here. Then I go over into this idea of being in this immediate now. To me, I think is kind of looking at Brian Masumi's ideas of affect. In other words, the idea of like the precognitive space before we're able to, you know, process anything. It's kind of like this precognitive moment of now, which is kind of disallowing kind of reflection analysis. In other words, we're constantly being stimulated. And then Baudrillard in, what's it, I think the Gulf War did not happen. He's talking about the notion of image production and reportage being accelerated to the point where the event itself comes in question. And this is something, this is his discussion of the Iraq War, and then also the you know, the beginnings of actually the bombing of Belgrade, not Sarajevo. And that was, kind of an amazing thing when I saw this happen in 1990. Just seeing this, the notion of the live, really kind of was made real to me at that point. So let's see here. Let's look at a few examples, and maybe we can start maybe a little bit of discussion on this, because I just kind of blasted through that pretty quickly. So, I think one of the, marvelous and ironic things is that the beginnings of, in the beginnings of the net, I mean, this is pre-web, the World Wide Web being established in 1993, 1994, Tim Berners-Lee, I think this is something fairly common knowledge, is that the coffee cam at Cambridge University, and just a matter of literally just this cam going up on a Unix network, and just saying, okay, the most banal thing possible, hey, do we have coffee? Okay, well. And then, this expands to, live webcams, I think, basically turning into self-surveillance. But the thing is that some of these things I find a bit quotidian. But I think one of the things that this comes into is the notion of artists like Wafaa Bilal, his piece Domestic Tension in Chicago at Flat File in 2007, which was very interesting because I was there at that time. And him and Ben Chang built this situation in which people would be online and they would see him live in real time. And basically, Ben had built this webcam and aiming apparatus with a paintball gun, and Wafaa stayed in there for a month. And it's just like, people would just come in and just blast him, because this was, still in the cultural mind space of the Iraq War. So guess what? If you want to shoot an Iraqi, here you go. And I think that was an incredibly powerful piece. And I think I last saw this at the, while we were still in the UAE, at the Art in the Age of Anxiety show that Omar Khalifa put together at the Sharjah Art Foundation. So, about you've got YouTube coming in, and, individuals start, instead of being as much real time, going into the notion of stored video rather than live information, turning into databases and people working with that. That goes into the early to mid 2010s. And the thing is that now what we have is that I think there's this notion, I feel, is that, and I'll be interested in hearing Geert's idea on this, is that I feel that as we are continually more and more saturated, that there's this idea that, there's this idea of affect and engagement, and so only the live can bring that. We'll look at this feed later. This is ROYLAB's live COVID state feed. This is basically the live state of COVID infection throughout the world. It's been going on since I think about March last year. And it's still going today. Twitch, I think Twitch and Discord are fascinating spaces because of the fact that they're even going beyond Instagram Live and YouTube Live, where we're at, and Facebook Live, and the fact that you have a small targeted audience that's most times watching video games, sometimes not. We won't go there, but there's actually some there's actually a art space in New York called Baby Castles, which actually goes live from Twitch pretty often. So it isn't one or the other. But the thing is that the thing that I'm interested in is that there's this immediate moment that you have when you're engaging the video game space. It's sort of like if you're playing Fortnite, is like, who's going to shoot first and what's going to happen? What is the bleeding edge of experience at that point? But the thing is that really that interesting? And I think that this is something that Corey Archangel engages with his classic piece called Super Mario Clouds, where he reprogrammed a Super Mario Brothers deck, to the point where there's only the clouds left. And maybe that's kind of this. Maybe this is kind of the hollowness of real time that we might actually be in. Then, of course, real time. We have the crypto world, which is completely about real time. Looking at, say, if you're doing the NFTs being non-fungible tokens, this art craze that's going on currently, which has sometimes interesting, sometimes not so interesting art pieces. But nevertheless, one aspect of this is the cultural ramifications of live cryptocurrency prices, because of the fact that when you go and publish one of these, or minting them, as they say, is that you have a gas fee. And basically that's the amount of gas that you have to pay to publish a piece is dependent on the traffic and the price of Ethereum at the moment. So the thing is that you have these artists and collectors basically jostling moment to moment, seeing what the price is as a form of social media culture, which I think is really different. And the thing I also thought was interesting is that I heard an anecdotal story about Beeple, the guy who sold his everydays for $69 million. I heard that there was a live stream of him, and his reactions. And the thing is that I haven't been able to find it, but the thing is, I think that the anecdote is probably more interesting than the actual record, because of the idea that the notion that this would happen and that people would be watching Beeple, potentially watching Beeple and his reactions moment to moment, kind of plays into this notion that I'm looking at. And this goes into, once again, real-time crypto culture. And, you have people who are looking at, the variation of like Ethereum maybe going up or down $500 per coin, or $1,000 per coin, within an hour. So this is very, very real time, maybe not necessarily so related to video, but, culture and media. So one thing that Negin and I have been talking about is also this notion of, and I haven't quite sorted this out yet, but in computational systems, and Negin came up with this, which is really interesting to me, is this notion of real time, hard real time, soft real time, and firm real time. And I haven't sorted this out. In other words, it's the matter of saying hard real time is absolute, soft is is fungible, and then firm, is somewhere in between. And I think this is something that I'm intending to do a paper on this, and that I'd like to try to get that sorted out in that document. And then the other thing I think is really interesting, and that actually has to do with my presentation in the last video, Vortex, is the notion of the deep fake. And recently, Tamiko Teal in the UK did a piece called "Lend Me Your Face," in which people would enter and take a picture, and then almost immediately, basically would be remapped onto speeches from Barack Obama, Greta Thunberg, and so on. So this is something in which Teal was, looking at the notion of a real-time deepfake, in a positive critical manner. But of course, she's pointing at, indexically towards, the opposite use of these things. And I think this is a very interesting piece. So here, I have some feeds here, but do you think that we should have some conversation about what I'm throwing out on the table?
Yeah, first of all,
would you like to respond?
Yeah, I want to ask something about, there's a crisis in live feeds, obviously, because of the live broadcasting of terrorist attacks and so on. So
sure.
I wonder, can we even say that, let's say, Facebook Live is now a kind of a dead space, or would we say, it's so surveilled, or has it been tamed, or what is the correct term for this after, let's say, the whole series of events that obviously culminated in Christchurch, New Zealand?
Right. And I think that I think that these events, like Cleveland and Christchurch and all these things, have definitely. I look at Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram and so on as what I would say is that part of the mainstream commons, and I think that there's a lot of examination of these of these potential events, and even the January 6th insurrection,
of course,
in real time. So the thing is that there's this really, I don't know, I think this may be where hard versus soft real time comes in place. I think this might be something where what happens is that when, say, in America, and actually even on YouTube there's a delay, but I mean in America you have a 7-second delay, and typically that had to do with the idea of the Federal Communication Commission being able to silence something as innocent now as swearing. So the thing is that I think the issue for me is that with the FCC censorship, with the bleep, we have so many channels and so many users, so many broadcasters. So basically, in order to censor something like that, we either have to have as many people watching as many feeds as that are happening, which is of course not feasible, or you could crowdsource this like they did in the UK, basically going in and putting it online that people could be watching all the police feeds and then reporting things. Or the other thing is that this is a potential for artificial intelligence, and the thing is that then what are your engines, what are your models, and how accurate are these feed monitors, and so my opinion on this is that at this point in the internet, I think that we are still going to have some bad actors slip through.
But we know that there is already kind of 3 spaces. There's let's say the pornographic live space. There's the game live space.
Yeah.
And somehow this rather undefined rest. And we could say
and let's put it this way. I think
a lot of the kind of attention of the authority is precisely going to this undefined rest category.
And I think the first 2 spaces are actually remarkably uninteresting. Because in other words, they're the expected. So what happens is that this open space, I think, is I think it's this space of cognitive contestation, and the matter of saying, we're working with the idea of the signal and content, and what is acceptable to a platform. I mean, I know what I would feel, but the one thing that I think is interesting is that what does the Facebook conglomerate consider as appropriate? And I think this is a huge question. In other words, it's like, because Facebook isn't just Facebook anymore. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's WhatsApp, and whatever else. So the thing is that it's really interesting in that if you think about it, in the United States, in the 1960s, you had 3 VHF channels, and then you had the lower UHF channels. But in a way, we have these sort of media monopolies, but they're online now, and then the thing is that I see some of the same cultural regimes coming around to possibly look at regulating the current platform infrastructure that was coming in place with the 1950s 1960s in television. But of course, in 1950s and 1960s television, you didn't have somebody pirating in and broadcasting atrocity.
Okay, let's now go to the feeds. The feeds remind me really of a 19th century feature, going all the way back to the telegraph. That was in fact, communicating live stock value.
Yeah, the ticker tape.
The very beginning of the telegraph network was built to communicate the stocks prices over large distances, for instance, New York, Chicago, and so on, right? So this was already happening in the 19th century. And this is how I encountered feeds in the 1980s, of course, the very beginnings of the computer networks that we know now were doing precisely that. They were, a representation of live.
Here's Turkey.
Of not just Wall Street, but precisely connecting all the global stock markets. Now, one of the feeds that I looked into recently over the past years regularly is the live feed of Bitcoin, and precisely there. I'm not so interested in the price as such, but of course, as you already said, you look at the fluctuations and you look at, let's say, possible visual evidence of pump and dump schemes, people joining together to push either the price up or down. And there's a remarkable amount of evidence for that. Okay, shall we look at some of the feeds, live feeds?
Yeah, well, this is live.
Where are you taking us?
Yeah, okay. And the other thing is with the COVID feed, I think this is probably the first live necropolitical video feed. I think that's, to me, that's super interesting. You're looking and seeing who's being infected, who's dying, who's and then you're looking then at the the geopolitical and the infopolitical ramifications that's just unfolding before you. Did
you look at it recently, by the way? Also,
pardon me.
Did you look at it recently?
No, you know what? Let's see here. Hang on just a moment.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
That's what I was running. This is.
Oh
this,
yeah, that
this
one. Yeah, but I was so curious if you could see for
this is live. If you look down at Spain,
in India, and
yeah, and it has this. The other thing I think is interesting is it has this beautiful soft jazz in the background. Which is really a cognitive dissonance with the whole notion of thing. I'm going to turn it off. I think it's offensive to me actually.
Yeah.
But but it's just the matter that if you look up here, in some ways, it's very compelling to be looking up here and saying, okay, who's going to recover? When's the next recovery going to be? When's the next death going to be? When's going to what's going to happen? It's like it's a necropolitical ticker, and on one hand. When Nagin and I were watching the first parts of the pandemic, we were looking at this going, oh my God, what's happening? But now that things have turned into kind of maybe a more stable real-time model, even though that there are, there are horrors happening in the subcontinent and West Asia and that sort of thing, and it's just a matter that saying that, to see something like that was really, really compelling.
Which other ones do you have?
Yeah, I have the Iceland.
Okay, yeah.
So here we go. A live volcano. So here we have here we have one, a great geological disaster, or event, happening live, but we're in Iran, we're in Minnesota, we're in Turkey, we're in Amsterdam, and we can take a look at this, but from this vantage point, and you can hear the rumbling. And then let's see what else I have. Let's see here. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
The International Space Station, right?
Yes. Why not? No?
It's lovely. It's a 4K feed from the space station. It's it's no place that you could ever be. And here's a live spacewalk. And actually the thing is that if you put on an Oculus Quest or something like that, you'd be like an astronaut, which is kind of an amazing thing.
24/7. Yeah.
And then let's see here. This isn't the UAE, but I'm kind of doing a little nod to my former time at the UAE. This is nobody's there. This is the University of Massachusetts Amherst Falcon Cam. They were there earlier, but this is these are the politics of it. You don't know what's going on, and then of course, as you would with me, of course I would have the kitten cam.
Okay.
And here we go.
Oh, yeah,
what's more wonderful than nice little fuzzy kittens, floating around. We can have our affective fix, live. We don't have to, that our affective fix doesn't have to be doesn't have to be horror or pornographic. It can be, it can be lovely. But the thing is that I think also the other matter is that there are people who sit around and watch these kitten cams all the time, which on one hand I think is really.
Patrick and Gerd, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, we know.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Amazing, and good luck to write up, the theory of real time for the 21st century.
Sure.
It's your task. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. Patrick, if you could stop sharing, then I can just go back to the feed.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. So let me share YouTube again. So I placed YouTube on us here.
Yeah.
Hope it's running. There's a delay, so we'll see that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there it comes. No? Is there a delay?
Yes, a couple of seconds delay. And the feed will switch then. So.
All right. Here we are again, guys. Did you miss me? Did you miss me a little bit?
I mean, obviously. Come on.
Yeah. Or I miss you. For sure, in general. Okay, so what we have here, this is our second guest, the lovely Natalia. Natalia studies communication and art history right here, or maybe right there, where you are, at John Cabot University in Rome. And her research interests include the intersection of visual and physical in social media platforms and issues related to digital images. And today she will somehow perform and expand a piece on Dada laughter, recently produced for the Meme Studies Research Network. So Natalia, the floor is yours. I will listen to your reasoning and then we will have a little Q&A. Maybe I will rise up a little bit and we can have some stroll around, okay?
Thank you so much for this lovely introduction, and thank you for having me here physically and partially virtually too. It's really lovely to be here now in Rome and there on the Zoom. So yes, we talked about a little bit about this virtual, let's say, videos and images, and I'm going to talk about this, let's say, idea of laughter through the images. Obviously, memes are about laughter. They're essentially about what makes us laugh. However, what I think is particularly interesting for me was to attempt to look at the laughter formally. Namely, how formally laughter happens through memes. And I found that memes share a certain affinity with Dada an avant-garde movement from the interwar, after the First World War and during the First World War, which originated during that tricky time. So on the formal level, let's say, both Dada and memes thrive on the idea of deterritorialization. And what I mean by it is that they take elements, the visual elements from the cultural sphere, for instance, the advertisement or images from the newspapers and photography, and they take them away from this original context and put them in new context. So let's think about the Bernie Sanders meme that floated around a few months ago. Or in terms of Dada, let's think about collage, which is all about taking bits and pieces from different spaces and putting them all together. What I like about the idea of deterritorialization is that it implies this idea of attack, of violence that takes something away from where it belongs to and pushes it into new relations in this new sphere where it puts it. So when I think about Bernie Sanders meme, for example, it's not only just about taking an image of him, it's about forcing this image to be in relation with different images that surround him, different environment in which it is put. And that's how the meaning is created that makes us laugh. That's how the laugh happens. So when I was thinking about it, I ended up coming up with those three types of laughter that we can see as being both in terms of memes and in terms of Dada, especially in terms of Dada collage. The first one is all about pointing and mocking. So obviously laughter is targeting someone. In terms of Dada, it usually is ambiguous though. So let's imagine the image of Mona Lisa, but not the nice one that's in Louvre, rather a very silly reproduction of it, a crappy one, with some really nasty writing beneath it that says LHOOQ. I'm talking about a piece that was made by Marcel Duchamp in 1919, which is mocking and pointing Mona Lisa. The title itself, LHOOQ, it's a pun in French, which could be phonetically understood as she has a hot bottom. So obviously there is this idea of juxtaposition of text and image, just like we have in memes. The problem is that we're not really sure who we are laughing at. Is it the museum that puts up Mona Lisa or sells the reproduction? Is it the grand idea of art or genius? Or is it us, the viewer, who is looking at it? In memes, the idea of mocking and pointing is usually simpler and even more self-referential. So again, let's imagine a picture of a beautiful landscape, dramatic clouds, dramatic lighting, and a person standing looking at this landscape and taking it all in. And then we have a writing beneath it that states, "That's how I see myself each time I listen to sad music and look out of the window." That's an example of a meme, for example. However, in that case, the self-referentiality is both referred to us, the viewer, who somehow connects to this situation, and we're laughing at us, but also at others who could experience this situation. Another type of laughter that I believe is both present in Dada and in memes is laughter as a sort of attack, laughter as a sword, let's say. In that case, let's think about COVID-19 pandemic and all of the memes that came out of it. It is about some sort of, yes, laughter. Yes, it is sarcastic. It is sometimes very violent even. However, it gives a sensation of community, that we are all in a situation that is perhaps quite tragic and even too tricky to comprehend, too difficult to grasp. And in that sense, the laughter that memes produce help us connect with others and help us cope with this tricky situation. In terms of Dada, the Dada artists who were trapped in the situation during the First World War and right afterwards, where the world was collapsing in front of their eyes, obviously, again, laughter seemed to be the only way for them to cope with this terrible reality. Yes, it was about attacking what was left out of the modernity that they were fighting against, even though they were part of it. However, it was some sort of shield a shield from the reality that they had to deal with. So we have the laughter as smoking and pointing, we have the laughter as this weapon or even a shield, and then the last, let's say, genre of laughter that I was exploring is about laughing as the point and the process in itself. So in terms of memes, of course we have to take into consideration that there is an agenda behind some of them, if not a lot of them. There is a certain goal that maybe we're trying to reach by using certain memes. But memes themselves are not necessarily targeting, trying to reach a certain goal. What do I mean by that? Thinking about Dada again, laughter that was provoked by the Dadaist was not necessarily trying to change anything, was not necessarily trying to achieve anything. It was about acting out. It was about involving the passerbys and the artists in this action that was happening for the sake of happening. It was about constantly moving and stirring the idea of anything that could be stable. It was about constantly changing any meaning that seems to be reached. In terms of memes, we also seem to have this, let's say, community that comes together in the space of the internet and constantly stirs any meaning that seems to be reached. Think about the Bernie Sanders meme again. Each meme adds this little brick to the wall that it's not a stable wall. It's not something that's solid. It's constantly changing, and it's not safe at all because it evolves all the time. So by this, I believe we sort of can look at memes from a slightly different perspective and at laughter as this disruptive force that I think really well reflects this situation in which we are currently now online with memes, be it as simple images or videos and this such of digital images, and in which partially we already were back then during the Dadaist times.
Wow. Well, that was very interesting. I'm gonna rise a little bit just because when I think about stuff, I feel my head just like moving and reaching the sky. And basically, I was thinking about possible parallels between also the Zoom bombing that we were just discussing with Gabriele and this idea of memes. So first of all, I think that memes can be also collective. And so it's a matter of also doing communal and convivial effort in order to build brick by brick that stratification that you were talking about, while Zoom bombing is sometimes an act performed by a single person that just wants to disrupt in the sense of, let's say, break the continuity of a dialogue. So maybe we can expand and elaborate a little more on this dialectical balance between interruption, intrusion, and, let's say, brutal break or creative break. What do you think about that?
Of course, just let me first rise up so that I can reach your level, and then we can continue our discussion. So, no, I think that what you guys were talking about previously was brilliant in the sense that the very concept of disruption and of sort of attacking what seems to be tried to keep stable is something that laughter does. And when we think about Dada, when we think about memes or Zoom bombing, that's precisely what is it all about. When you think about, for instance, the acts that were being staged in the cabaret in Zurich by Dadaist artists back in 1916, it's exactly about the disruption. It's exactly about attempting to distract from the reality by bringing this reality into question. And so, again, as you also mentioned, I think that laughter in this sense can be a very good weapon and can be a very good tool, because when you are being targeted, when you are being the one who is attacked by the disruption, sometimes the best way to deal with it is to laugh, is to use laughter as the shield again. So that's, yes.
And at the same time, it's very interesting that you were investigating the links between the past avant-garde movement and the, let's say, contemporary landscape, where sometimes user can be unaware of reproducing or adopting some avant-garde strategies. Somebody talked about wild conceptualism, not just like you can be a conceptual artist just because you want to have fun with your smartphone and you are 12. You don't even know about a guy named Marcel Duchamp.
No, you're right. You're totally right. I mean, I think that making those connections is useful in the sense it opens up possibilities of looking at the same thing from a different angle. But especially like bringing, when I was thinking about memes, I wanted to look at them from this more, let's say, visual perspective by actually like, you know, asking a question, okay, what are we looking at and what do we see and why do we see it in this way? And that's why I wanted to bring a bit of the, let's say, formal analysis into it. But I think that the use of images for the sake of laughter and how they're formally placed, it's something that has a very long history and that we've been using over and over again without maybe being conscious about it. I mean, think about the animations that Terry Gilliam was doing for Monty Python Flying Circus. It's exactly about putting things together from different contexts, using the deteriorization in order to make them, you know, to laugh and at the same time to mock, to nudge what's there. So, yeah.
In fact, there are now a lot of studies about remix culture and also meme culture that are somehow popping up and catching up. Also, the very Institute of Network Cultures in Amsterdam, that is basically at the core of this event with the Video Vortex research branch, is about to assemble and launch a meme reader specifically designed to track down and possibly describe those strange beasts that are now all around. And it's interesting that most of the time they are around without us being totally conscious about their multi-layer complexity. So it's important to dig them and to scrutinize them.
Of course. I'm very glad that we're, you know, on top of things and that we're now talking about things that are being talked about and hopefully, you know, adding a little bit into the discussion.
All right, just a final words, and then we have to switch the line again about this meme studies research network. Can you tell us something more about that?
Well, again, speaking of what's now being hot, it's a center that's been created at the University of Edinburgh last year, and it is meant to provide a space for discussion for scholars and researchers who are interested in memes on different aspects of memes. So besides providing the platform for exchanging thoughts and for publishing texts, we also have the Discord server where we can connect and, you know, exactly talk about what's going on, share ideas, share resources. So it is, I think it is great that it's out there, and it allows us to also reach people who are not necessarily coming from the strictly academic discourse and sort of bring the attention to memes as being those cultural elements that surround us and that we should be aware of and not just take them for granted.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Very good. Thanks, Natalia. And we'll see each other in a while. And now we'll pass the line again to the Zoomiverse.
Thank you. And it allows us to also reach people who are not necessarily coming from the strictly academic discourse and sort of bring the attention to memes as being those cultural elements that surround us and that we should be aware of and not just take them for granted.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Very good. Thanks, Natalia. And we'll see each other in a while. And now we'll pass the line again to the Zoomiverse.
Thank you. It allows us to also reach people who are not necessarily coming from.
We are still in a delay, so I guess we have to wait a couple of seconds.
As being those cultural elements that surround us and that we should be aware of and not just take them for granted.
I guess we can start, yeah? So welcome again from the Universe. This is Andreas from now live from Izmir, or close to Izmir, and I'm just wait. I have a sound double running here. Just trying to fix that.
Also with people who are not necessarily.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Now, I'm together now with Aras Özkan, who's also close to Izmir. So we're coming both live from Turkey, from the Mediterranean coast. And I don't know, Aras, you want to introduce yourself with a sentence? I don't know where to do we start there, what you show.
Well, thank you, Andreas. I teach at Izmir University of Economics at the Cinema and Digital Media Department here. I also teach at New School's Media Studies program. And I see Antonio here. Hi, Antonio. We know each other from New School. Well, today I want to revisit a discussion that actually took place in the 1990s about the ontological impacts of digital media. In 1990s, this was a theme that appeared in William Mitchell's work, Lev Manovich's work, Bellur's work, and Virgilio's work too. And I want to revisit this discussion after the emergence of what we can call algorithmic culture in between now and then. Because I think that discussion was, that subject was interrupted by, political and economic emergences. And I think we need to revisit it with the notion of algorithms that we have today. I'll also start, like Patrick, with Virgilio. In the Vision Machine, in the opening of the Virgilio's book, Vision Machine, he conveys a conversation between the famous sculptor Auguste Rodin and British writer Paul Giselle, in which Giselle is very much fascinated by Rodin's work, and he asks Rodin how he depicts movement in these two chunks of bronze and stone in his sculptures. And Rodin asks him to compare his sculptures with photographs. And Giselle says, in photographs, people seem to be frozen, not like your sculptures, which seem to be moving. And then Rodin explains that in his sculptures, let me show you. Oh, I need to, I'm sorry, I need to share screen. Oops, all participants, only host. It shows me advanced sharing options. Okay. It doesn't give me an OK button though.
You just click share screen again, and
okay.
You should get.
Oh, okay. Now I get it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Rodin explains to Giselle that in real life, you don't see this kind of postures in people's movements. And he says that in my sculptures, I take some aspects of the movement, and then the unfolding of that movement I depict in my sculptures, unlike photographs, which are taking frozen movements from the photographs. Giselle says, well, then the art lies, your art lies, whereas photographs show the truth of the moment, right? And Rodin says, no, because you can never, disrupt the movement, or freeze the movement in real life. The art tells the truth, the photograph lies by freezing the time as it is, he says. Actually, this conversation
points to the argument Gilles Deleuze makes regarding the ontological transformation introduced by mechanically reproduced moving images in modernity. Because he explains that in previous ontology, the whole idea of reality or perceiving the reality relied on certain privileged moments. It was the event itself was revealed in those privileged moments, and just like Rodin does in his sculptures, the artist or the scientist or the philosopher had to look for these privileged moments and understand the event by analyzing those privileged moments or working through those privileged moments. And in this regime of perception, the flow of time was not considered as linear or homogeneous. The time intensified or thickened in those certain moments. Whereas cinema, as a model for modern representation, created another logic, brought in another logic. It's divided the continuous movement into sections of time and space and analyzed the event through random segments that were taken with equal distance from each other. And it recreated the original movement by reconstructing those successive segments. And in this mode of perception now, there was no movement that was more privileged than any other. And each image, each segment was powerless in representing the movement within itself. All of them together reconstructed the representation. In this model, we see the emergence of the notion of interval. It's the distance between the images. It appears as a limit that at once separate and connect every image to each other. Now, it's not difficult to follow this argument, I think, when Deleuze suggests cinema as a model of modern perception of the world. If we consider that the same logic appears in epistemology and representational methodologies of modern sciences, such as sampling. This transition was not really a smooth one. There were, of course, reactions to homogenization and linearization of time as such. The first thing that comes to mind is, for example, Henry Bergson's notion of duration, durée, in which he was arguing for an understanding of time, in which the event, which was bounded by the event, rather than any external register of that event. Raymond Beller, in those discussions in the 90s, was arguing that mimeticism of photography and cinema fulfilled a representational need that freed the painting from having to fulfill representational functions and directed modern painting towards abstraction instead. And at the same moment, he was pointing to a new species of images, which were computer-generated digital images. And he was arguing that these new species of images was breaking away with the double helix of representation between abstraction and mimeticism that always appeared in the previous forms of visual representation. These new species of images were accompanied by the transformation of text, speech, and other sorts of information in many ways. And the ontological transformation I will try to explain is a cumulative effect in this respect. Now, in the last decade, in the course of widespread penetration of digital media technologies into everyday life, we saw some certain media practices and forms emerging, such as the social media, gaming as a technological and cultural form, mobile media devices and practices, closely related with these streaming media services, the emergence of streaming media services, and ultimately the platform capitalism, which appears before us as a new economic modality that envelopes all these emerging forms and practices. Okay, let me switch between these. Okay. Now, all these new forms brought to our attention something that has been at the essence of digital media technologies from the very beginning. The code that processes the data, the program, the logical sequences, if then else statements, simply the code that processes the data. The algorithms, algorithmic processes and flows, algorithmic regulation and control, which appear as invisible threads that bind the digital communication sphere together. Besides and beyond their economic and social functions, algorithmic processes introduce a new ontological framework in the digital age that surpasses the modern ontology I was just trying to explain through Deleuze. In the world today is a world that we perceive and relate to and act upon through algorithmic processes as such. And if we go back to visual representation in search for an explanatory model, Nicolas Mirzoev provides us with a fine example of this ontological transformation in his 2016 book, How to See the World, without not much pondering upon its implications in depth. This is the iconic photo of the Earth that Jack Schmitt, astronaut Jack Schmitt, took during Apollo 17 mission. It's called Blue Marble. I'm sure you are all familiar with this image. I know that Andreas was using it in his presentations before. And similar to this is another famous image, the Earthrise. And this was again taken in the same mission. And let's compare these with this new algorithmic images of the same style and kind. This is the new version, let's say, of the Blue Marble, and this is the algorithmic version of the Earthrise. Now, these photographs of the Earth functions in the same way, in a more effective fashion, perhaps. They show us the Earth from a vantage point that allows to see it as a whole. Yet these are not photographs. They are not images originating from a single image taken from a particular vantage point or perspective. They are composite images produced by algorithmically stitching together a multitude of images taken from a variety of points of view that are again algorithmically determined. These images do not have a definitive frame. What we have here are renderings. And they are dynamic images. They are only temporarily bounded by the screen they are projected upon. They show us things at various scales, from various perspectives, from various points of view within the same projection. Think of Google Street View, for example, as an example of that. Now, scale, framing, and point of view have been important elements, not only for the modern visual representation regimes, but for modern epistemology in general. The scale represented the proximity of the object and thus the level of detail in observation. Framing determined what is included and what is left out. Point of view determined the observer's position and relation to the subject. These are not only photographic terms, but they are rather epistemological concepts in that sense. And in this new regime, these concepts do not disappear. They rather become multiplex, dynamic, and generative. For me, the important thing is the temporality of this algorithmically created and sustained perception, its relation to time, the way it affects our perception of the event. On one layer, various digital information technologies, such as satellite imagery, drones, surveillance cameras, and millions of smartphones, GPS and GIS technologies running in the background, constantly observe and generate visual representation of things in their geographical contexts at various scales and levels of depth. At another layer, various computational algorithms, networking tools, protocols, server logs maintain a continuous registration of digital information flows pertaining to almost every kind of social interaction, both of corporeal and virtual kind, personal and public lives of social subjects. They are all registered as such. In fact, perhaps these two are not two different layers, as these visual and textual registries of digital information are highly integrated, continuously connected, and form a complex compound altogether. This continuity is important in my view. It provides us with another entry point for conceptually framing the novelties of this ontological form, because the notion of interval disappears within such continuity. The interval, which was the constitutive element of the cinematic mode of representation, is surpassed within such continuity. And the observation takes the form of scanning as such. Now, this is the first digital image in history. It shows Russell Kirsch's then 3-month-old son, Walden. Kirsch was the engineer who developed the first image scanner in 1957. And the first thing he scanned to test the device was a picture of his newborn son. Therefore, we can argue that actually the native form of digital imaging, in its native form, the digital imaging has a different logic than photography. But at another layer, scanning as such becomes the metaphor for the contemporary form of surveying rather than picturing by framing. Scanning volumes and surfaces of things and flows at various details replaces the framing of things at various intervals. Scanning from the scanning of the Earth from satellites to scanning of the internal body. It goes through that kind of, how would you call it, like spectrum. And in this ontology, while the resolution, the level of detail somehow becomes a priority, the frequency also loses its importance. The theoretical limit for the frame rate of silicon-based sensor is set to be around 90 billion frames per second, which is, almost limits, way beyond the limit for human perception. So it loses its meaning. Another important aspect of this new representational logic is how it disposes the observer to a secondary position. His or her presence becomes subordinated by algorithmic processes. Cinema or modern inquiry ideally necessitated the presence of the observing subject at the center of the event. There had to be a man with a camera to record the event, or the researcher had to be present in the field to collect samples during the time of the event that she or he observed. Modern observing subject, in this sense, operated in a depth of field in which a perspective, a point of view could be established. This new ontology presents a depth of time instead, a synchronous, globally synchronous depth of time, so to speak, as the big data today expresses. It is the embodiment of globally synchronous depth of time, the best. It refers to a constant and continuous scanning and registering of various kinds of online and on-site activities at mass scale. At this point, we don't have to be there at the time of the event in order to observe it. The observation can be retroactive, which is often the case. Yet such continuity, since it makes the retrospection always already available to us, also leads to the constant contextualization of the present moment in a historical perspective. Algorithmic processing of the continuous data flows allows us to detect patterns, fluctuations, tendencies, and trends as they happen. And the availability of retrospection produces a further teleological orientation in our inquiries. We have all the necessary information of the past and try to predict what happens tomorrow. We find ourselves always on the breaking tip of the wave, constantly trying to analyze how it will crash. This always obviously relates to Walter Benjamin's comment on Klee's Angelus Novus painting. But how are we doing about time, Andreas?
Sorry, we have a couple of minutes, Aras, but if you like, if it's a good point to stop and give it for question to the audience, that would be...
Okay, let's do that then. I was going to comment also on the practical implication of the transformation of such episodic conditions, but yeah, we can leave it to...
Yeah, but maybe you can just round it up with a sentence on that, because that's logic we would like to continue. And how do you conclude out of this?
Okay. Well, at the practical level, this new ontology not only transformed the epistemological conditions and constitutive aspects of information, but it also affects its cultural circulation, I think. And when we look at the social media, particularly today, it brings to my mind a concept that was introduced by anthropologists, particularly Bronislaw Malinowski, which passed under the radar of media studies people mostly, because this was a concept about face-to-face communications that he discovered, so to speak, in his work in Trobriand Islanders in 1923. He realized that the islanders that he was studying were making these idle conversations, like they were engaging in what he calls free, aimless social intercourse. Inquiries about health, comments on weather, and he says, I quote, they fulfill these kind of conversations, he says, fulfill a social function that is their principal aim. They are neither the result of intellectual reflection, nor do they necessarily arouse reflection in the listener. Each utterance is an act serving the direct aim of binding hearer to speaker by a tie of some social sentiment or other. Once more, language appears to us as an instrument of reflection, not as an instrument of reflection, but as a mode of action, he says. What he describes, he calls this phatic communication, P-H-A-T-I-C. And this is the kind of thought we constantly make, actually. I'm expecting Andreas to come to my house, and Andreas rings the bell. I open the door and I say, oh, Andreas, are you here? And Andreas says, yes, I'm here. I say, how are you? Andreas says, well, I'm fine. How are you? Now, there is not really information exchange in this conversation. If we consider information as something new, we repeat what we already know. But as Roman Jacobson later on formulated this concept into fatigue function of verbal communication, this act brings us together and creates a playground in which we can exchange information later. So it's an entry point to the communication, and Malinowski was calling this fatigue communion, not even communication. He called it communion. being together as such. Now, up until now, since we media studies people are interested in mediatic communication rather than face-to-face communication, this wasn't really a concern for us. But I think at this moment, with the social media functioning as such, we have to take this into account, or this notion. And actually, Ulus Baker in 1990s was pointing to television becoming a fatigue device as such, rather than informative device. It no longer informed us, but accompanied us through our lives, he was saying. Mm-hmm. Now, there's
Aras, do you think this is actually what's happening with streaming? Like there's multiple streams, like what we've seen with live streams Patrick showed us, they're accompanying us in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there is no problem with fatigue communication as such, or communication turning into affective and fatigue functions as such. But one thing is that social media here becomes an ambient form of communication, fatigue communication as such, but also becomes a part of the scanning I mentioned above. We do not only exchange smileys and hearts, but also what we hear and what we think, what we find different and impactful, and we exchange information. And these become a scanning of the world. They become part of the registry. And yeah, that's one thing. And the other problem is, I guess, the informative and fatigue communication forms become multiplex into each other as such. We can't really discern the difference in a way.
Thanks a lot. We get just about to switch to Rome again. Well, I would suggest maybe that after we have the Zoom room still open for the video jam session, so people can ask questions in the Zoom room or on YouTube, and we can follow that up. Thank you so much. I think Donatella and Alberto, we're on time. Yeah, okay, I get the sound. We're switching. Okay, thank you. So I'm going.
Okay, and here we go again. So we are approaching the end. I'm standing or sitting or whatever it is here with Marco Ferrari. So hello, Marco.
How are you?
Marco Ferrari is a visual artist and filmmaker, split between Chicago, Illinois, and Rome, Italy. He teaches video production and cinema studies here or there in the Department of Communication at John Cabot University, but also in Franklin University, Switzerland. And he is the creative director of the Virginio Ferrari Foundation, which is a non-profit art organization. So Marco will screen a little video to conclude our Cabot Garden transmission. And but before, just a few questions. So Marco, I noticed that many of your recent video projects are centered around the very idea of video projection. So etymologically speaking, we already can spot a similarity, no? Projection and project. So you not only project ideas out of your mind using the medium of video, but you also want to project those very videos out of the average screen. So tell us more. First of all, why did you start getting interested in beamer projections?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Kami, for being such a great host this evening. And
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, and Donatella in the communication department and the whole Vortex community. It's a pleasure being here. Yeah, I guess it's a kind of conflictual situation as a filmmaker, right? You're constantly capturing footage. And so I was always interested in as filmmaker, what do you do with this footage? It's always interesting that a lot of films or filmmakers don't really consider the actual projection part of their work. They hand their work off to theaters, to somebody else. And so having the ability as a material to think about projection, to me seemed really important. And I started out basically just capturing as much footage as I could and making small vignettes. And, you know, with the projector technology about 20 years ago, I started doing a lot of VJ work, and so in dance clubs and for concerts. And that always allowed me to kind of experiment, right, and to have fun with the projection, editing in real time. And so that kind of opened up this world where basically, you know, I could actually make work and then think about where I'm projecting and the spaces I could project in. And so that kind of freedom within projection, within the idea of projection and the concept of it, I started to develop more and more after I started, you know, seeing a lot more video artwork and thinking about, you know, the actual conflicts of you know, image making and what we do with those images. So really the idea of projection, as you were talking about, is this feeling of release, kind of making videos, working with digital images, constantly with the screen, with a machine. And, you know, no offense to you, but we with this relationship.
Took a while.
Pardon me?
No, it took a while to realize that joke.
Yeah, sorry, it was a bad joke too. But yeah, what is our relationship with machines? And if you're a photographer or videographer, you start to realize you're constantly connected to this device. You're trying to record reality. You're trying to make sense of reality, and so for me, the attachment to the image is something that I'm really curious about. And so, being able to release the image in different spaces is also something that's, you know, kind of an intimate experience, but also can become public.
Very good. And what about the snippet that you're presenting today? Is that part of a bigger project and is also meant to be screened, possibly, outdoor?
Yes. So I've been, since I came here to Rome, I've been developing a film called Porta Maggiore, and it's about a community in the eastern part of Rome, about a community of resident activists that try to protect spaces, kind of doing civil activism, and they basically tried to save a cinema that was being abandoned. They kind of saved the bus line that the city. Yeah. They saved the bus line that the city kind of let go of, and so, and then the kind of third big project that they're doing is trying to save a lake. It's called the Lago Exnia and Lago Bulicante. And so what I ended up doing with this projection was actually use the archive of this factory called the Exnia, and I projected images, words onto this this structure, and the kind of formation of the lake happened because a developer started building in this space, and he was not allowed to build there. He just owned the property, and from there a lake formed, and ever since then, that's happened in the early 90s, basically the residents have been trying to protect this natural preserve. And so the clip that I'm showing is the archive of the women workers in this factory that happened around the 1950s, and so I'm basically projecting their images, newspaper clips regarding the kind of protests that they were doing in the 1950s for workers' rights. And so this is being projected onto this abandoned structure that's inside this lake.
Okay. Oh, very good. So what I'm going to do now is to go back to the original position, because I suppose they're going to put me back to sleep in the warehouse. And then we're going to see your video. And then it's going to be the end of this event. So First of all, I want to thank you for your contribution. Then I'm going to rise again as Batman. Sorry for that. But you can come with me. So I don't want to be taller than you. And so
I'm still pretty tall.
Thanks for that. And yeah, this is the path that I'm supposed to take. So let's try to do it without collapsing.
I think you
Let's
can
try.
do it, Kami.
What's going on? All right. Little by little, baby steps. Okay, so this is basically the end of our transmission from the Cabot Garden. Remember that we stopped streaming from Rome, but if you can, if you want to join the Zoom room, there are some additional screenings and extras there for you. And so have fun if you wish. And that's all. So goodbye from Kami, and here you have the video from Marco.
Processes.